Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Kilayim, Chapter 9, Halacha 2, in the Arch Torah on 78a1. Now, we're going to be dealing with other kinds of articles. Now, in Vayikra 19:19, there's two prohibitions on the type of Shatnez we're talking about. One is where it comes onto your skin, and the other is where you're wearing it. You're not allowed to let it come onto you. So there's two parts in the prohibition. Now, what about, like we're going to be dealing with hand towels, what if you're going to be warming your hands with it? Well, you're not wearing it, but you've allowed it to come onto you in a way where you're getting some sort of benefit. That's Aaron Yudaleib ben Edna, who is learning the second Kilayim, and he's 1 year old and 2 months. So he's joining me in this year. So in the Mishnah, it says like this: the hand towels, the mantles for Torah scrolls, and bath towels are not subject to the Kilayim restrictions. And Rabbi Lazar is going to prohibit these articles when they contain Kilayim. Now, Rabbi Lazar's argument is a good idea. He's holding that since people will occasionally use the articles to warm their hands or wrap themselves, the rabbis categorically prohibited their use for any purpose if they are made for shatnez. So we're going to be dealing with that. And what do we talk about with hand towels? Well, we're talking about either something that you dry your hands with, like that's what the Rambam says, or we're talking about a placemat, that's what the Rosh Cirilio says, or we're talking about a hand towel that's a napkin where bread or meat or eggs can be served by distinguished people. So, like they might put an egg with a cloth and hand it to somebody. That's what the Rosh is saying. And what about for the Torah scroll? Well, that's going to be the jacket that the Torah scroll is put into. That's what the Pnei Moshe says. But the Rosh says that it's actually going to be what they cover the bima with. And then we have the bath towel, which is used for drying your entire body, but the Rambam says that it's actually going to be a towel used to dry dishes or floors. So the Mishnah continues with a ruling that everybody agrees with and says that the barber's apron containing wool and linen are prohibited on account of Kilayim. Now, the Rosh is saying about this that the barber's apron is the smock that's worn when the person is having their hair cut to prevent hair from falling on their clothes. And everybody agrees that that's going to be the case. Now, again, the underlying issue is going to be Rabbi Lazar's worry that perhaps somebody is going to get some sort of benefit and warm their hands or even wrap themselves with it. And that's what's going to be the issue. So the Gemara says that hand towels, and this is dealing with the Mishnah which relates to the status of various types of towels to Tuma. So in Kilayim chapter 24, Halacha 14, in the Mishnah there, it says there are three types of towels with regards to Tuma. It says that there's a hand towel. A hand towel is susceptible to Tuma through midras. Tumas midras, by the way, is going to be where there's like a nida or a zav or zavav, and they're going to put their weight on the towel, and even if they're not touching it. And this then becomes an avatuma, and then that can transmit tuma to other people who touch it. So only an object normally used for resting, like a mat or a bed or even a couch, is susceptible to tumas midras. And the Gemara is going to explain why a hand towel is going to be subject to this tuma when it is not designated for resting, because that's a hiddush. Then it continues and it says a mantle of a Torah scroll is susceptible to tuma of a corpse. So the Torah mantle, having been designated for a sacred use, is sanctified and can never be used for resting on it. So it's not subject to tuma through midras. That's what the Rosh Cirilio says. But it is considered a kli, it's a utensil, and therefore it can contract tuma from a corpse. And similarly, it can get tuma from a sharetz or a nevila, but in that case, it will not become an avha tuma. So the Mishnah means to contrast articles that acquire avatuma through a corpse with those that get it through ava tuma, through a midras. And by the way, with tuma law, an object is not considered a utensil unless it serves a human. And something that serves another utensil can't contract tuma. That's, by the way, from Kilayim. And Rashi also says that in Shabbos 63b. It's a good point. In other words, the Gemara is going to be talking about why the Torah mantle is going to be considered utensil that's subject to tuma when it's designated to protect a Torah scroll and not to the service of a human. So that's what's interesting about this one. And it continues and says the kind of towel used for wrapping the instruments and the lyres of the levim is tahor from any type of tuma. This is going to be a cloth used by the levim to wrap their instruments, and it's not considered a utensil at all, and therefore it's not considered subject to tuma, says Mara Fulda. And this is because the wraps are servicing the other utensils, and they were never used to service humans. So that's what we're going to be going back to, like with this contrast with the Torah scroll, because again, in Tuma law, an object is not considered a utensil unless it's going to be for a human. And over here, this is going to be for a Torah. Now, it's next to the lyre and the wrapping for the lyre. And they're saying, well, the wrapping for the lyre services a utensil. So a utensil for a utensil doesn't make Tuma. So how could it be that this one for the Torah scroll, which is a wrapping for a Torah scroll, not a human, is going to contract Tuma? What's going on here? So the Gemara is going to understand and explain why the hand towel is susceptible to Tuma, and that's going to be through midras, and that's only going to be when items are normally used for people to rest on, and that's when it's going to be fit for midras. So Rabbi La says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that it is because one sometimes places a hand towel upon the cushion and can even sleep on it. And Rav says, and I like this answer, it is because someone placed a hand towel under his elbows and rests on them. In either case, they both agree, and Rabbi Kanievsky says about this, that for this reason too, a hand towel is considered somewhat designated for resting, and that's why it's susceptible to Tumas Midras. And the Rosh Cirilio is saying that a person who wishes to rest his arm on a hard surface will sometimes use a hand towel to cushion them. And I myself have done that. So yes, that would be considered subject to Tumas Midras. Now, we see that hand towels are susceptible to Tumas Midras, but what about the status of towels with regards to Kilayim? And the Mishnah is going to resume this discussion, getting back to Kilayim. And Rav says it is forbidden to use any towel that contains Kilayim, and the Halacha is in accordance with the one in the Mishnah who forbids it. Now, that's going to be the Halacha that follows Rabbi Lazar, who rules in the Mishnah that hand towels, Torah mantles, and bath towels are all prohibited on account of Kilayim. So why is it that Rav is favoring the minority opinion here? And the Gemara asks and says, why did Rav not explicitly say that the Halacha is in accordance with Rabbi Lazar? And the Gemara answers and says there's a teacher of Brisos who taught that the Mishnah's ruling in reverse. In other words, it attributed the lenient view to Rabbi Lazar and the stringent view to the Tanna Kama. And to avoid this confusion, Rav simply stated that the Halacha follows the one who forbids the Kilayim. And there's a related incident on the qualification of the prohibition of towels and the like. And Rabbi Yochanan would place a Kilayim napkin over his clothes when he would eat. Now, again, you say, well, we're worried about the it coming onto you, or you're wearing it. Now, how can you wear a Kilayim napkin? But keep in mind that we just looked with the Tumas Midras and the laws of Tuma, that a utensil for a utensil, isn't going to be subject to Tuma. So what would this be? Well, you're protecting the clothes. That's your utensil, is your clothes, and you're using the napkin, which is a utensil. That's to protect your clothes. And so the Gemara asks and says, but since the napkin is draped over them, is it not forbidden on account of Kilayim? In other words, didn't it just come onto you? And so the Gemara answers and says Rabbi Yochanan wore the napkin only so that his clothes would not get soil, and it was not worn as a benefit to his body. He didn't want the clothes to get soiled, and therefore the Kilayim prohibition was not applicable. And by the way, this is very similar to what we're learning with Tumas Midras, right? Because again, a utensil for utensil. Now, there's another incident regarding the status of a napkin with regards to Kilayim. Rabbi Zerakan says they handed Rabbi Avuna a hot egg in a napkin that contained Kilayim, and he would not accept it. And he acted in this manner because of the Mishnah that stated that garment sellers may sell Kilayim garments in their usual manner, modeling them for the customer, as long as they do not intend in the summer to protect themselves from the sun, and the winter to protect themselves from the rain or the cold. In other words, they intended, if this seller intended the garment to protect them from the heat or the cold, it's forbidden. You're getting benefit from it. So we see that the Mishnah is saying that protection from the heat or the cold is considered a form of benefit that renders this to be subject to the Kilayim prohibition. So Rabbi Avuna didn't accept the egg because the Kilayim napkin would protect him from the heat of the egg. And so that's why he would run afoul of it. So you see the difference with this napkin. One was as a garment for a garment or utensil for a utensil, and the other was to protect his fingers, and he would get benefit from it, and he'd be protected from the heat, and therefore he would not be allowed to use the napkin in that case. Now, the Gemara goes back to the mantles of the Torah scroll, and it says that the mantles for Torah scrolls are subject to corpse tumah. And Rabbi Kanievsky is saying that in the course of the Gemara's discussion, the reason for the Mishnah's ruling that a Torah mantle is subject to Kilayim is going to come up. And, again, the idea is that a utensil does not contract tumah unless it is used to service people. Now, since the mantle apparently services only the Torah scroll, the Gemara has to explain how it's also going to benefit a person and therefore turn it on to become subject to tumah. So the Gemara explains why a mantle covering for a Torah scroll is considered a utensil that can contract tumah. And Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman says in the name of Rabbi Yonatan that a Torah mantle is susceptible to tumah because sometimes somebody can make it folded into a sort of pocket and place it on his lap and set his Torah scroll down on it. And thereby, what can be happening is this is somebody who wants to study Torah from the Torah scroll, and they're going to fold the mantle across the lap and place the Torah scroll on it. In this instance, the mantle is serving in a manner of a garment because it's going to cushion the scroll. And it's going to be considered a utensil that services a person, says Rabbi Kanievsky, and that's what's going to make it susceptible to corpse tumah. In other words, the Torah scroll itself has wood, and it's very heavy, and the parchment is very heavy. And now, if it's going to rest on your bones, it's going to hurt. So by using the mantle as a cushion, you now have turned it into a Kilayim object, and it now becomes a utensil that, by the way, is subject to tumah. It's not the same as the napkin for Rabbi Yochanan. Now, there's another Amora who's going to explain why the Torah mantle is considered a utensil that becomes susceptible to tumah. Rabbi Ba said by Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef, who says in the name of Rav, that it's because someone who carries the Torah scroll warms his hands with the mantle. Now, again, he's not even taking it off. He's carrying it, and it's wrapped up. And maybe it's a cold day, and now by trying to get the warmth and, even just holding it, you're in a way using it like a garment to get warmth. And that's what's going to make it susceptible to tumah. And in the Bavli, in Beitza 14b, it's going to say that a curtain is susceptible to tumah, even though it seemingly functions as a wall. And that's because the attendant will sometimes wrap himself in it for warmth. And this sort of use for warmth is going to make it susceptible as a utensil. You notice the connection between utensils and Kilayim. Now, Rabbi Ba's reasoning is basically saying that because the mantle can be used to warm their hands with it, it's effectively being used as a utensil. And that is what's going to make it subject to the Kilayim prohibition as well as the tumah prohibition for utensils. Now, the Gemara is going to challenge this case by Rabbi Ba, and the Gemara says, Rabbi Bun Bar Hia said to Rabbi Ba that if in fact people warm their hands with Torah mantles, then why is a Torah mantle of wool and linen not forbidden on account of Kilayim? And Rabbi Ba answers, and he said to them, he said back to Rabbi Bun Bar Hia, it is not Rav in whose name I excited this explanation about the mantle. And it says, Rav actually said that it is forbidden to use any towels mentioned in the Mishnah, including the Torah mantles, if they contain Kilayim, and the Halacha is in accordance with the one who forbids it. So, although the Tanakama of our Mishnah permits mantles of Kilayim, Rav rules in accordance with Rabbi Lazar, who says that they are subject to Kilayim. And Rav's reason is precisely that where somebody's carrying the Torah scroll, that he's going to warm his hands with the mantle. Now, again, Rav had a Baraisa that reversed the opinions of the Mishnah. And so it's unclear, which is which. And Rav is basically saying that, and again, he's not saying, Rabbi Lazar says. He's basically just saying that, the ones who forbid it, that's why. And again, he's making a link between these two things. He's making a link between the kelim, the utensil, and also the susceptibility of tuma and the susceptibility of Kilayim. Now, we're going to look at this now with the Tanakama's opinion. So Rabbi Yonah says to Rabbi Ba, but why did you not tell Rabbi Bun Bar Hia that Rav actually means that a Torah mantle is considered utensil because somebody warms his hands with it when the Torah scroll is removed and the mantle is empty. So that's a little bit different. In other words, one is going to be dealing with somebody who's carrying the Torah scroll, and that was the first implication. And Rabbi Yonah is saying, no, when are you warming it? You're warming it when you've actually taken the Torah out of it, and you actually might put it on your hands to warm it. And so the Tanakama is going to hold that since somebody does not warm his hands while carrying the Torah in the mantle, which is the normal usage, the mantle can be made of Kilayim. But since people are going to warm their hands in an empty mantle, then the question is that mantle now going to be considered a utensil and susceptible to tuma? I'm actually working on kelim now, and the idea is that you have to look at a kli as what is the normal use of it, both for nullifying a vessel and also when it becomes susceptible to tuma. And so you're saying, look, if you're carrying it with the wrapping, that's the normal use. The normal use is not to use it to warm your hands when you've taken it off. So Rabbi Ba responds about this, and because he objects to it. And he's saying that if I had said this, and Rabbi Yonah had responded, is the Torah mantle not prohibited for benefit on account of the sanctity, even without this Kilayim prohibition, then what would I have been able to say in response? And in other words, he's saying, says the Marafulda, that I could not explain Rav as meaning that the Torah mantle is considered a utensil and susceptible to tuma because one warms his hands while it's empty. That's what Rabbi Yonah is saying. And since it's designated specifically for holding the Torah scroll, and it may not be used, it's not supposed to be used while it's empty. So Rav is saying that this is talking about warming the hands while they're carrying the scroll. And it follows that according to Rav, a mantle may not be made of Kilayim, since even using it for carrying a Torah scroll, you can end up with a Kilayim violation by warming your hands while you carry it. So he's saying that, he was forced to basically say that Rav is ruling in accordance with Rabbi Lazar, who forbids Torah mantles of Kilayim. And with respect to Kilayim, the Marafulda says about this that even incidental benefit is forbidden. And so if somebody intends it, since somebody might intend to warm his hands with the mantle while carrying the Torah scroll, the rabbis forbid making Torah mantles of Kilayim. And that's going to be the issue. Now, the Rambam is saying that hand towels and bath towels are going to be where, you know, that like what Rabbi Lazar said, which is that these two are subject to Kilayim because one warms his hands with them. And the Gemara now gets into the bath towels, and it says that it is because sometimes. So what's the reason that Rabbi Lazar, was against the bath towel for Kilayim? Now again, we're seeing three different reasons. One, we're seeing because somebody can rest on it. One is we're seeing you could warm your hand with it. But what about the issue with the bath towel, right? We're learning different applications of Shatnez here. That's why we're going through these three different cases, because they are used slightly differently. And they do have implications both with Tuma, but also with Kilayim. So what's the issue with the bath towel? And the Gemara says Rabbi Lazar's issue with the Kilayim and the bath towel, and says it is because sometimes someone can see his teacher in the bathhouse and wrap himself in the towel. And so since it can sometimes be used as a garment, it can't be made as Kilayim. Very good answer. And the idea, says the Radvaz, is that Rabbi Lazar forbids a bath towel of Kilayim because people can warm their hands with it, just like that. But accordingly, they're giving another reason, that you could wrap yourselves in it, and that now it could be used as a garment. So Rabbi Abahu said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that women's balnarim are forbidden as Kilayim. These, by the way, are very large towels that are used by women to dry themselves in a bathhouse. And the Gemara is going to wonder why women's balnarim are the same as men's balnarim. In other words, bath towels. So since the Tana Kama and Rabbi Lazar disagree in the Mishnah whether ordinary bath towels used by men are forbidden as Kilayim, well, what about for women? Is that going to be an issue? Is there a difference between men's towels and women's towels? So the Gemara says, what are the women's balnarim to which Rabbi Yochanan refers to? The rabbis of Caesarea said it's the antitaya. This is going to be a special towel that was shaped like garments and actually worn in the bathhouse. So since women would actually wear this antitaya, where it actually had like some functionality like a garment, that's going to make it different than a regular sort of bath towel. So in the Tosefta of 510, it's stating that the women's balnarim are empty from Kilayim unless they're sewn. In other words, the issue is what happens if you've now sewn the bath towel so that it's like this antitaya, which is going to be like this garment that's actually worn in the bathhouse. So the issue becomes now that it's been sewn, that's going to be, says the Tosefta, where it actually becomes subject to Kilayim. And this is a style of like garment that's going to be used with the same even material as the bath towel. So now we get into something that everybody agrees on. That's going to be the barber's apron. This is going to be where it has both linen and wool. And keep in mind, it can just have a tag on the bottom of the apron. It could be a linen apron with a wool tag on the bottom of it, and it could not even be touching you, but the entire garment is forbidden. That's what people don't realize with the Shatnez issues, that it can be on the other end of the garment, you're on the other end of the garment, it's covering you, it's protecting you from the hair getting onto you, so it has a service, and everybody agrees. So the Gemara is going to explain why these aprons are subject to Kilayim, and the Gemara says that this is stated regarding a case where somebody intends to use the apron for the sake of a garment. In other words, that has an opening for his head and it can be worn like a garment. But if he does not intend to use it for the sake of a garment and doesn't have an opening for a head, then there is no room for thought that it is subject to Kilayim. Now, when a barber's apron has an opening for a head, says the Rosh, that's going to give the character of a garment, and that's going to make it subject to Kilayim just like any other garment. But when it does not have the character of a garment, and this is why it's next to the woman's bath towels, then it is merely just a cloth draped over your clothes, and that is not going to be subject to Kilayim. And the Rosh is going to maintain that this qualification pertains even to the opinion of Rabbi Lazar, by the way. In other words, everybody agrees about this. So have a great day, and we will get into dealing with burial shrouds. What about Shatnez for that? Have a great day.